Yeah, that's it. So thank you so much. Basically, it's my honor. So my name is Matthew Griffin. I'm the CEO and founder of the 311 Institute. I look at two kinds of futures. I look at the future and deep future. Now, I regard the future as being the next 20 years, which is where the vast majority of multinational organizations typically spend their time, sort of in that 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20-year horizon. But also work with all G20 governments where we look up to 50 years out. So, for example, if you've gone to Dubai, soon you'll be in a flying taxi and all kinds of other fun stuff. That's it. So, it's my honor and privilege to be with you all today. And if I was there in person, I'd be introducing my own risk game of throwing ceramic cups at you all in order to try to disrupt your own business continuity practices. So risk is absolutely everywhere. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking to you about a variety of different risks, some that you are seeing and have seen, some that you haven't seen. But I'm just going to be scraping the tip of the iceberg. So if you want to understand what risks are actually emerging and already here, what they are, and why you might actually care, and why your clients might care, then you can scan the QR code and you can download the Trends Codex and the Exponential Technology Codex. For example, how do you hack a molecular assembler? And I know what you're thinking, they don't exist. Except they do, because Toyota have already used viruses to assemble the next generation of lithium-ion batteries. You're welcome, you can have that risk for free. So we're going to be able to do all kinds of things that originally looked like science fiction with increasing ease today. And part of the reason for this is just when we have a look at the technology landscape, there aren't the sort of few general purpose technologies that everyone keeps talking about. You know, things like 3D printing, 4D printing, artificial intelligence, blockchain, VR, AR, and so on and so forth. 5G. There are literally hundreds of emerging technologies. And when you start combining all of these together, you get next generation products and services. All of these technologies are a blank slate, and all of these technologies can either be used to do great good. So for example, we can use bioreactors to solve global famine. We can use CRISPR gene editing to cure cancer. But we can also weaponize all of these different technologies and do lots of naughty, nefarious things. So this wheel is actually in the Trends Codex as well as the Technology Codex. And if you do suffer from insomnia, then you can go through it and see, tell me what you think. But as you can see, there's hundreds of different technologies, and trying to get your head around these is difficult. But each one of these technologies can either change an individual industry completely, or every industry, every single part of global culture and society forever. That's all we're doing. So, in the true sort of sense of the word, what we're going to do is we're going to start basically with a little conversation about the doomsday games, because I think it's quite pertinent. So about 2 years ago, 400 of the world's top experts and philanthropists came together in New York, and you can read about this on Bloomberg if you want, and they were separated into two teams. Now, those teams were tasked with two things. The red team was tasked with trying to find lots of different ways to destroy the planet, as well as kill everybody, obviously, goes without saying. The blue team was tasked with trying to find ways to stop them from doing that stuff. Now, in the words of the organizers, they said when it came to trying to find new ways to kill all humans on Earth and destroy the planet, these guys might as well have been science fiction writers, because they were really, really good at it. Not a problem figuring out that. However, when it came to the blue team, they said, well, the blue team was lacking. And the blue team didn't really come up with any solutions on how you stop someone destroying the planet. So, and when we have a look at risk, whether it's technology or society or whatever it happens to be, a lot of the risks are always running way ahead of us. And we only try to figure out how to stop them once they've done something bad. Killed a lot of people, for example, shut down businesses, stopped supply chains, all that kind of thing. Now, when we actually have a look at the rules of risk, the first rule of risk that you should all know about, because you are much better at this than I am, is if you can't see the risk, you can't stop it. So I'm going to show you. Now, when we actually have a look at this This is the rate of price increases and inflation over the past really sort of 2 years. Now, we all know that risk is interconnected. When you have a look at the increase in the prices of some of these different things, it's multiple factors. Look at the gas price, that's not fun. So, when we look, for example, at things like the gas prices that have increased by 244%, the risk to Volkswagen is they now have to shut a factory. So when we have a look at commercial risk, things like that basically are always interrelated with things like the war in Ukraine, the global pandemic, supply chains that lack resilience, and so on and so forth. And when we actually have a look at all the different complexities in today's world, things are getting not only riskier, but risk is becoming systemic. So what I thought we'd do is we'd play KPMG bingo. Now, the reason for this is I want to know how many of the risks that I'm going to talk to you about do you already know about? Because if I'm showing you stuff that you already know about, then as a futurist and as an advisor, I'm not doing my job properly. So we're going to start basic. When we have a look at a lot of the mega trends that we are being subjected today, every single system is going through what we call a system level shift. We're seeing huge economic shifts, we're seeing environmental shifts, militarial shifts, which is significant when we look at politics. We see political shifts, we see societal shifts, and we, of course, see massive technological shifts. So from a risk perspective, we're not dealing with one set of constructs. We are dealing with hundreds, in some cases dealing with thousands of different things that are coming together to really muck up our day. When we have a look at environmental, for example, basically we have problems around biosecurity. So for example, with things like extreme weather, we are seeing 50% of all crops being destroyed. That leads to a societal risk because now we see a mass shift in climate migration and economic migration, let alone anything else. When we have a look at climate change, no secret that climate change is now starting to get to the point basically where it is almost irreversible. Now, climate change not only means that we see anthropogenic warming, which from a risk perspective means that we see more people dying in cities than ever before, which is a trend that will continue to accelerate, which affects workforce, urbanization, and all those sorts of things. We see resource scarcity. In fact, recently we've actually seen things like rare earth metals being used in trade wars as a weapon. So when we look at resource scarcity, we are now using 1.7 Earth's worth of materials, which is unsustainable, which then leads to scarcity, which then leads to conflict and supply chain risk. When we look at sea level rise, sea levels are rising at 5 to 8 millimeters per year. That's enough that by 2040 we will see 54 megacities around the world flooded. That will mean that we see 1 billion people from those cities having to leave those cities, which then fuels economic and climate-based migration. It also means that from an infrastructure perspective, cities like Louisiana, Miami, London, as well as Shenzhen will generally be underwater. So that is a huge risk, not only to businesses, but to society. We have water wars. 70% of all the fresh water on the planet today is consumed by agriculture. We need more people, or we have more people coming through, which means we need more cows, we need more crops. They use up more water. So by 2030, the United Nations estimates that 129 countries will be suffering from extreme water stress, where water stress is coined as the inability to grow crops. So we have food scarcity coming through. If you're in California, the risk is that the Hoover Dam and Lake Mead reservoirs are now so low that if they drop 1 meter further, then they will stop generating hydroelectric power for California. In Australia, we have fires. So increasingly, when you combine these, they have a direct and or indirect impact on your customers. Flooding in Malaysia shuts factories. That is part of climate change, so on and so forth. When we have a look at political risks, we're entering into a bipolar world. We're used to the US calling the shots. Increasingly, China is calling the shots. The US doesn't like that, so we now see increasing tension between the two. As a result of that, we are starting to see trade being used as a weapon, sanctions being used as a weapon. We're seeing corporate blacklisting become a weapon of choice for a variety of different governments around the world. Increasingly, we are also seeing strategic dislocation. So as we saw during the last trade wars, companies that had operations and bases in China, whether that's manufacturing or sales, started pulling out. With Russia, companies are pulling out. This affects supply chains, business continuity, investment, and so on and so forth, hiring and talent. We also have an innovation Cold War brewing. Now, when we have a look at the innovation Cold War, we are seeing the bifurcation of global technology standards. Increasingly, China wants to dominate global technology standards. They have invested $1.4 trillion over the next 5 years to do so. And when we have a look at that, we see China trying to dominate 5G, 6G, artificial intelligence, as well as energy standards and a variety of other standards like quantum computing technology standards, which then means you have a technology risk within your clients because you either use Huawei 5G with an associated cybersecurity risk, potentially, or you use Western 5G standards, or you use Chinese artificial intelligence standards, which don't work properly with other global standards, and so on and so forth. And then you have fragile government, where fragile government is increasingly ineffective because of polarized society. And if you have a fragile government, you have a government that fundamentally can't pass new legislation or do anything. Now, when we start diving into some of the new sort of things that we can do, we have effective compute that is starting to come through. So for example, using all the different sensors in your computer, whether it's the cameras, whether it's the microphones and everything else, we now have artificial intelligences that are able to tell what you're feeling. They're able to predict your emotions. Now, in a call center environment, that's fine because you can use that to better help people. But from a criminal perspective, we can use those signals to start doing behavioral engineering. So now the artificial intelligence via behavioral computing, conversational artificial intelligence, and so on and so forth, suddenly starts knowing how to manipulate you. Maybe you are the CFO of a large bank and the AI is starting to manipulate your thoughts and opinions. These are already here. We have artificial intelligence being baked into almost every single company on the planet. However, courtesy of companies like Microsoft, Google, OpenAI, Baidu, Meta, even Uber, we've seen artificial intelligences that have spontaneously evolved. In the case of OpenAI, their artificial intelligence spontaneously learned maths. In the case of Facebook, their artificial intelligences, which were there to try to set the optimal prices on e-commerce sites, suddenly started colluding. In Google's case, they had chatbots that created their own language, then encrypted it. So when we start having a look at deep neural network artificial intelligence technologies, what happens when your customers start adopting some of the more advanced artificial intelligence technologies that even the best experts don't understand, and they start evolving and doing things that they shouldn't? For example, if you encrypt an artificial intelligence's communications, or if it does it, explainable artificial intelligence is useless. The latest OpenAI DALL-E machine learning program created its own language. Explainable AI becomes useless, let alone Facebook's AIs collaborating, which would breach financial services regulations. We have open-ended AI. Open-ended AIs are artificial intelligences from companies like Uber. They have an AI called Poet, and it creates its own problems and then tries to figure out how to solve them at digital speed. What happens when this is weaponized? what happens when the artificial intelligence's problem to solve is your cybersecurity posture. These get quite scary, and these are real, and they are very, very good already at what they do, bearing in mind that technology accelerates and gets better over time. Robo-hackers. In 2019, the US military, under the guise of DARPA, ran a capture the flag competition to try to create artificial intelligences that were able to scan tens of millions of lines of code, find exploits, and then either patch those exploits in code or exploit them. These are called robo-hackers. They are incredibly fast. And the US military is now using an artificial intelligence robo-hacker to defend their systems. So when we have a look at these AI hackers, they operate over 100 million times faster than a traditional human hacker. They are multi-parallel and they can be deployed at scale for tuppence on the pence. We also have science fiction-like risks coming through. Recently, researchers created an mRNA aerosol that is capable of delivering a genetically engineered tool into people's lungs. Now, it's a healthcare development, but in this case, people with cystic fibrosis use a nebulizer to breathe in an aerosol containing a genetically engineered serum. It clips out the bad genes, clips in the good genes. Can you imagine weaponizing that? So, as you see on the bottom of these slides, I talk about the threat levels. But this kind of thing, the United Nations said that bioweapons were the greatest threat to mankind, not nuclear. That has now been knocked off the top spot. When we have a look at the pandemic, 4 years ago, Canadian researchers took the genome of the extinct horsepox virus. They then ordered custom DNA from a company called Twist Bioscience for $100,000, and they de-extincted the horsepox virus. The horsepox virus has a R rating of 3 to 4, which makes it much more contagious than coronavirus. They took it to the World Health Organization and said, look at what we've done. We de-extincted a deadly virus. To which the World Health Organization replied, what we find particularly intriguing about this particular development is these researchers de-extincted a deadly virus, and yet they didn't really have much skill, much resource, much money, or much expertise. So the latest pandemic has cost the world about $40 trillion. If you want to engineer the next global pandemic, it'll cost you about $1,000. When we have a look at things like adversarial attacks in the cyberspace, all I need to do, for example, is carefully put a sticker on a stop sign, and because artificial intelligence sees the world differently to humans, I can send all of your vehicles speeding through a stop sign at an intersection at 100 miles an hour. I can also adjust cancer scans if I'm running fraud within the US healthcare system. Fraud in the US healthcare system is worth about $360 billion a year. I can affect quality control of products as they're coming off the product line, and I can do all sorts of different nefarious things with machine vision systems. Biometric spoofing. Now, how many of you use your thumbs, your voice, or your face to unlock your phones, your bank accounts, and everything else? Increasingly, we can use deepfake-like technologies alongside machine learning technologies to recreate your face, to recreate your voice, to recreate your fingerprints. And in China's case, a set of hackers in China recently used artificial intelligence to recreate the faces of 30,000 people, and then they committed a $64 million fraud against the Chinese government because they hacked into the national insurance databases in China and managed to get the Chinese government to send out loads of checks. So we can spoof the vast majority of your biometrics and your biomarkers using technology. So you are not you. We also in the UK had someone who used a voice cloning system to clone the voice of a CFO of a energy company's boss in the UK, and that person got away with $250,000. So increasingly we can spoof all of your biometrics accurately as well. Data poisoning. Now, if we want to start messing around with artificial intelligence, we know that your cybersecurity program has been trained on this set of information. We can poison it with this set of information. And while you might have a state-of-the-art cyber platform, we know exactly how to get around it. When we have a look at the legal space, I could use data poisoning against robo-lawyers, which are artificial intelligence lawyers, so that you can't find the case information that you wanted, so that you present the wrong information at court. Or the robo-lawyers start presenting the wrong information to whoever's actually using them. And then we can use it to create a whole variety of poor decisions, because junk in, junk out. And when we have a look at the use of artificial intelligence in business decision making, more executives are using artificial intelligence not just to understand the data, but to help them come to decisions. So if I poison your data, you might suddenly make the wrong strategic choice. Ransomware. We started off trying to ransom you. Then we ransomed your business. Then we ransomed your city. Now we can ransom your country. If you have a look at China, they've joined up all their government databases. Imagine encrypting all of those. And then I can finally decide to encrypt all of the data on your implanted medical device. Or, if you're a company like Jude's Healthcare, I could launch a ransomware attack against you, encrypt data on IMDs. Now I hold all your customers' lives to hostage. Are you going to pay me or not? Brings me to my bill. We have rats in the factories and in the plants. By subtly adjusting sensor data from things like water utilities, nuclear utilities, chemical plants, I can cause a functional meltdown, and as we saw over in Saudi Arabia, I can blow your chemical plant up. Bearing in mind that everything is becoming increasingly digital and connected, have fun when I start blowing your plant up. BMI hacks. In healthcare, we're using brain-machine interfaces to help people with locked-in syndrome talk and communicate via text, natural language, and even images. Now, the threat of this attack is fairly low, but what happens when I start hacking into BMI devices and suddenly ALS patients are saying things or looking like they're saying things that they didn't actually mean to say? So when we have a look at the neural space, there's a lot of neurohacking already going on. Adaptive printing. Now, if I can adjust the designs for a product that is 4D printed, so a 4D printed product is one that is capable of changing its shape under particular inputs, like humidity or temperature or whatever it happens to be. If I can change the designs of a 3D or a 4D printed product, then when your jet takes off in mid-flight, when it hits a particular temperature threshold, I can get the jet engines to curl in on themselves and I can crash your plane. And other nefarious things. DNA malware. We all know about malware. Recently, someone sequenced DNA. The DNA contained malware. When we sent the DNA to a police forensics lab, the police forensics lab's gene sequencing system decoded the genetic material, converted it into binary. Those binaries self-compiled and self-executed and wiped the servers of the police forensics lab. So if you think that malware is only binary or digital, we've already created DNA that has malware within it. Living sensors, just for a bit of fun. So using genetic engineering, the US military are turning plants into sensor devices. So what happens when I plant a sunflower outside of KPMG's offices in Canary Wharf, if I could, if it wasn't all tarmacked over, I could start listening in on your conversations. This stuff sounds like science fiction, but we already got to the point where organisms and plants can pick up RF frequencies, which we can then decode and figure out what you're talking about. And we can get them to do other things as well. This is science fiction come true. When we look at quantum computers, when we reach a threshold of about 1,000 qubits on a quantum computer, which is about 2024, 2025, probably closer to 2024, quantum computers will be able to crack 70% of all of the encryption on the planet. Everything. We've even been able to demonstrate that a quantum computer will take just 8 hours to crack 4,096-bit encryption. And we also believe that when criminals get this capability, and we've already seen criminals building nuclear magnetic resonance quantum computers in their garages of all places, we believe that the first target's going to be Bitcoin wallets. Now, doesn't Tesla have a giant Bitcoin wallet that I'd like to go and crack? Maybe. Deepfakes. Now, when we look at deepfakes, I would suggest you do not look at deepfakes. You should look at synthetic content generators. Synthetic media is the umbrella trend of which deepfake technology is a part of. So deepfake is a subset of synthetic media. Now, on the one hand, we're already using deepfakes, as we've seen with Putin, as we've seen with Zelensky, to try to sow dissent. We also increasingly see them being used to discredit credible people, discredit companies, and so on and so forth. This is being used to undermine democracy, to polarize society, which leads to fragile government. I can also use deepfakes to crash your stock, because I could create a deepfake of Joe Biden saying, I've moved the 7th Fleet off the coast of North Korea. And if enough people buy it, and if the quantitative trading artificial intelligences pick up on those signals because they read big data, so they read the Twitter feeds and everything else, do you sell Samsung stock? Samsung stock crashes. As a criminal, I buy the bottom. People realize it was a deep fake of Joe Biden. A little bit too late. Stock goes up again. I've made billions of dollars, thank you very much. And I exit my holding. So you also have reputational damage. We've seen Elon Musk continually being targeted by deep fakes, and I'll show you one in a moment. But fundamentally, deep fakes and synthetic media undermine your trust in everything, in one another, in your information sources, and so on and so forth. So here, and in 2 years' time, you won't be able to tell a deep fake from a real thing.
What can you tell us about your project B and how it will help people get rich right now?
Today we are launching an investment project that is working right now if you see this video. Absolutely everyone can earn in it. Everything is very simple. You invested your money in Bitcoin for TeslaTreeBot.net is our bot, after which everyone who invested their cryptocurrency will be able to receive exactly 30% of dividends every day from the invested amount.
How long will it take for dividends to arrive?
I'm sure that from 3 months.
Is the number of seats unlimited?
Yes, absolutely.
So not only did crypto scammers hurt Elon Musk's reputation, they hurt ARK Invest's reputation, and we have these. She's not real, she's generated by an artificial intelligence, did you tell? Then we have metaverse madness. I can hack your metaverse by bearing in mind that increasingly we have cities like Dubai and Seoul in the metaverse. I can crash your entire metaverse city's economy because in the metaverse we are building cities that have financial layers, reputational layers, operational layers, and so on and so forth. So when we look at the metaverse, that's going to be a mess. And then, of course, the latest and greatest one, and this is the last slide, we have the speed of change itself as a risk. Now, when we have a look at technologies are accelerating the rate of change. It is estimated by companies like ARK Invest that new technology will destroy over $50 trillion worth of market value, or current GDP, that they will create another $210 worth, or $210 trillion worth of global GDP. But if you think about the risk from your customer's perspective of being disrupted by new technologies, new entrepreneurs, new things, etc., half the global economy is being rewritten. That has a massive risk impact basically on share prices and everything else. And then it's getting faster and faster and faster like me. And then that's it. So I think we've got some time for Q&A. So I hope you enjoyed that quick jaunt through the risk future. And over to you.